Today, we're diving into the story of a scientist whose amazing career didn't kick off in some fancy high-tech lab. Nope, it all started with a childhood butterfly collection. It's just a fascinating look at how simple curiosity, when you mix it with some real determination, can literally change the world.
Okay, so picture this. You're 22 years old, still in college, and you publish a brand new theory about how cells work. And not just in any magazine. We're talking the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. This is one of the most respected scientific journals on the planet. For them to publish the work of a couple of college kids was, well, it was basically unheard of. It's like hitting a grand slam your very first time at bat in the major leagues.
So you have to ask, right? How does someone so young make a discovery that big? A discovery that really shakes up the scientific world? Was it just pure genius? Was it luck? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is this really interesting recipe of ingredients that started coming together when he was just a little kid. Yeah, that whole journey to unlocking the secrets inside our very cells, it began in a pretty unexpected place. With butterflies. A simple fascination that just blew the doors wide open to a world of science for a young, curious mind. So let's rewind and go right back to the beginning. Our story kicks off in Reading, Pennsylvania. This is where a young boy, pretty much left to his own devices, found a really unique way to keep himself busy, and without even knowing it, planted the very first seeds of his scientific career. Richard Ebright was an only child, and as he said himself, there really wasn't a whole lot to do where he lived. You know, playing team sports like football or baseball, that was out. But his super bright, curious mind found another outlet. He figured out there was one thing he could do all by himself. He could collect things. And so he did. And his curiosity was just massive. I mean, he didn't just collect one thing. He went after butterflies with this incredible focus, but he also collected rocks, fossils, and coins. And he wasn't just looking at the ground either. He became this avid astronomer, spending whole nights just staring up at the stars. This was way more than a hobby. It was this deep, driving need to see things, to sort them, and to understand the world around him. You see, he didn't just casually pick up butterflies. He was methodical about it. By the time he was in the second grade, think about that, 7 years old, he had already found and identified all 25 different species of butterfly that lived around his hometown. That kind of focus in a kid that young, well, that was a pretty big clue about the kind of scientist he was going to be. Now, for most kids, that probably would have been it. Collection complete, game over. But a single gift from his mother was about to turn his hobby into a real, lifelong scientific journey. Just when he was starting to feel like he'd done all he could with his butterfly collection, his mother, who was his biggest champion, by the way, gave him a children's book. It was called The Travels of Monarch X. And this book, well, it was way more than just a story. It was an invitation into this much bigger world of science. So this book just opened his eyes to the amazing migration of monarch butterflies, how they travel all the way to Central America. But here's the kicker. At the end of the book, there was a call to action. It literally invited readers to become citizen scientists to help out a researcher named Dr. Frederick A. Urquhart by tagging butterflies. And just like that, collecting Heteropus. Ebright started raising monarchs by the hundreds in his basement, from tiny egg to caterpillar to pupa to butterfly, and he'd attach these little adhesive tags to their wings before setting them free. For years, his basement was just filled with thousands of monarchs. But this whole process revealed something else about his scientific mind. He realized the work was, tedious, and he wasn't really getting much back. He said that out of the thousands of butterflies he tagged, only 2 were ever found again, and they were less than 75 miles away. It just wasn't enough data. He was already craving something deeper. The next big push in his development as a scientist didn't come have a success. It came from a failure, a very public loss that would completely change how he thought about what science really is. So, in 7th grade, full of confidence, Ebright enters the county science fair. He's sitting there watching all the other kids get called up for prizes, and his name is never called. He lost. He said it was a really sad feeling, just sitting there getting nothing while everyone else won something. But for him, this wasn't the end. It was just more data. He didn't just go home and feel bad for himself. He actually analyzed why he lost. His project was this really neat, orderly display of frog tissue slides under a microscope. It was basically a demonstration. But when he looked at the winning projects, he saw they were different. The winners hadn't just shown something interesting. They had tried to answer a question. They had run actual experiments. And that was his light bulb moment. Bam! He got it. Science wasn't just about making a cool display. It was about asking a question and then trying to find the answer through experimentation. And that realization just lit a fire under him. He knew right then and there that for next year's fair, he had to do a real experiment. So what did he do? He went back to what he knew best: insects. He wrote to Dr. Urquhart asking for ideas and got back a whole bunch of suggestions. And his projects started getting more and more advanced. For instance, one of his projects tested this cool idea called mimicry, the theory that viceroy butterflies have evolved to look like monarchs because monarchs taste awful to birds. See the difference? He was no longer just collecting, he was testing theories. This new experiment-focused approach took him right into his high school years, where he started working on a puzzle that would end up being the foundation for his most important discovery. The question he asked was so simple, but it was also deep. A monarch pupa, the chrysalis, has these 12 little beautiful gold spots on it. What are they for? Most people just figured they were for decoration, but Ebright, he thought, no way, there has to be more to it than that. And just look at his progress through high school. First, he and a partner built a device that proved the spots produce a hormone that's critical for the butterfly's full development. That won him first place at the county fair and third at the international fair. The next year, he figured out how to grow monarch wing cells in a lab and showed that hormone was key for cell growth. That won him first place at the international fair. And then he actually identified the hormone's chemical structure. Incredible. I mean, each one of these experiments was a huge achievement, but altogether, they were leading him, without him even realizing it at first, to an even bigger puzzle, one that's at the very heart of biology itself. The big breakthrough came when he was a junior at Harvard. He's looking at these X-ray photos of the chemical structure of that same insect hormone he'd spent years studying, and as he stared at those pictures, all the pieces just clicked into place. He said there was no big eureka shout, just this quiet, powerful moment of understanding. Okay, so to really get what he discovered, we need a super quick refresher on DNA. As you see here, it's the blueprint for life. It's got all the instructions. Now, scientists knew this blueprint was inside the cell's nucleus, but the big mystery was, how does the cell actually read the blueprint? How do those instructions get out from the DNA to tell the rest of the cell what to do? And this is where he made the brilliant connection. The pictures of the insect hormone, plus all his earlier work, gave him the answer. His theory was that the hormone he'd been studying was actually helping the cell read its DNA. It showed how the blueprint could be read and copied to make the proteins the cell needed to grow. Basically, his deep dive into butterflies led to a fundamental theory about how life works at the cellular level. This was a theory that he and his roommate published, and it was a really big deal. So when you look back at his journey, what was the recipe for making a scientist like Richard Ebright? Well, it really comes down to 3 key things. First, he had a first-rate mind, no doubt, but just as important was a relentless curiosity that started when he was just a little kid and never went away. And finally, he had a strong will to win, but for the right reasons. It wasn't about getting prizes. It was about wanting to do the absolute best work he could possibly do. And that leaves us with one final thought. Ebright's whole incredible journey started with something as simple as collecting butterflies. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's some simple curiosity from your own life that, if you followed it with that kind of passion, could be the blueprint for your own great discovery?